Welcome to K-Drama School. I'm your host, Grace Jung, and class is now in session. Show date announcements. On December 13th, I will be at Fourth Wall Cafe at 8 p.m. in Hollywood. And on December 18th at 7:30 p.m., I will be at the Comedy Chateau in North Hollywood. You can use the code MEDUSA to get a discount. And the ticket links for both shows are on my website at hj.com. I also have a monthly supporter via anchor.fm. You guys, if you want, you can donate directly to this podcast on a monthly basis via anchor.fm. I was really happy to see this because I didn't exactly promote it, but someone decided to give me a monthly donation to me directly on their own accord, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. So that is awesome. You can be that awesome person. You can be that person who gives me more fuel to keep this engine running. Okay? Because it's December, guys, and Squarespace is going to be charging me like, I don't know, like several hundreds of dollars to update my website. And Iris, the software that I use to interview my guests, they charge me $30 every month. And now that I'm not a student anymore, UCLA is no longer going to be paying for Adobe, and I have to edit on Adobe, and that's going to be taking like $30 or $40 out of my bank account every month, and I'm unemployed. So if you were to donate directly to me, then all of that would go to those expenses, and that would be super dope, man. That would be super dope. And thank you to the people who wrote to me, you guys. Like, I was so happy to hear from you. Thank you. Thank you to those who made specific Korean drama requests for coverages from me. It was really nice to hear from you. I'm glad that so many of you are doing well, and I'm glad that so many of you are watching shows that interest you, that keep you feeling alive. That's great. And if you haven't already, you guys, I haven't made this announcement in a while. If you haven't already, please subscribe to K-Drama School on YouTube, because I post videos of every single episode on YouTube, which you can find on kdramaschool.com. If you just go to the episodes part of the menu, and you'll see just a whole list of every single episode that's ever been on. And we're almost going to be at our 50th episode. Can you believe that? Can you believe that I did 50 episodes? Can you fucking believe that shit? I can't, because around this time last year, I was freaking out. I was freaking out about to launch K-Drama School as a podcast all by myself, not knowing jack shit about podcasting. I hadn't edited on Adobe Premiere in years, but so many good things came out of that, because like while I was editing my podcast videos, I realized like I could be editing my goddamn movie that I put on hold for 5 years. Like, why didn't I? So it inspired a lot of things in me, and it sort of got me to execute all these things that I was afraid of. Like I was afraid of um taking this on. I was terrified. I was a nervous wreck, and I'm glad that I pushed through and fought through and overcame, and I'm glad that I'm bringing this podcast show to you guys on a weekly basis. So thank you to all of you guys who listen, and thank you to you guys who write to me, and thank you to you guys who donate and support and share and like and subscribe and blah 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 da da. Thank you. It's an awesome present. We'll be discussing Reply 1994 because I discussed the other two Reply series on my podcast, but I haven't gotten to this one yet. And Reply 1994 is a comedy written by Yi Woo-jung, who also wrote Reply 1997 and Reply 1988. And it is directed by Shin Won-ho, the same two writer, director, collaborators of all the Reply series. Okay, and you have the same people playing the protagonist's parents. So you have Sung Dong-il and Yi Il-hwa. Okay, they play mom and dad of the protagonist. And this show aired on TVN in late 2013. That was a while ago. I mean, like 2022 is just around the corner. It's almost 10 years ago. So it's kind of crazy, actually. Wow, show came out a while ago. Okay, what I love about Reply 1994 is how it's reminiscent of Korean 90s sitcoms, and they were typically set in a hasuk setting. Hasuk is Korean for boarding house, which is reserved for college students. And this is very common in South Korea. You have students who come from all over the country and live in one house while they're going to school. Okay, and that's where the meals are served. It's prepped by the boarding house's family typically. And I don't know why, but it was always like college students, hasuk, and sitcom. Like that was like a thing in the 90s. And so I think this series kind of harkens on that trend because it's set in the year 1994. In the 90s, the biggest sitcoms that were known is like Three Guys, Three Girls, 남자셋, 여자셋. And it was kind of a ripoff of Friends at the time, which also has three women and three men. And Hingjin is another one. Hingjin came out, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s. And that was also about college students living in a boarding house. I've said this before, but back in the day, those sitcoms tended to be a gateway for young and up and coming stars to make their television debut. Many of them were originally singers or models, and they just started to showcase their acting abilities through these sitcoms. So these sitcoms played a very important role for a lot of these stars in the media ecosystem in South Korea. Your main protagonist is Hung Na-jung, played by Go Ara. Go Ara she's an amazing actress. She started out as a model, and she has very beautiful hazel eyes, and I love her energy and persona on this show. She's very likable, and she was in a really bizarre Korean drama that's on Netflix. In the US, it's called Black. It's a train wreck of a show, but she's quite good. But Kuwata won recognition for her acting chops way back in 2006 when she was in the SBS show Snowflower, along with our K-drama queen Kim Hee-ae. You also have the actor Chung Woo playing a character nicknamed as Garbage. In fact, all the boys on this show have nicknames, and it's to mask their actual names and their identities because the implication on this show, just like it is with all the Reply series, is that the girl will marry one of the boys. Okay, so it's like she's the only girl and there are all these boys and she's eventually going to marry one. So that's how it goes. You have the K-pop star Paro from B1A4. He is a character on this show, and I believe he plays a closet queer character. But unfortunately, they really sort of erase his queerness or dial down his queerness, and they almost treat it like a phase, you know? And actually, if you look at queer literary discourse from academia and queer scholarship, that the treatment of queerness as a phase is typically found in those up and coming sort of dramas. Um, well, these are narratives typically found in literature, but it's like a child who is entering their adolescent phase go through this queer sort of liminality. Like they're still exploring their gender identity, so you have like a lot of tomboy characters who are teenagers, or you have young men who are just kind of questioning whether or not they are into girls yet. I mean, it's very bizarre, but they treat it like a temporary thing. Pado's character, he's playing this this young man who is struggling with his gay identity and his feelings and affections for an older uh, colleague, an older student, but he eventually gets over it, right? Like that's always the, oh, like thank goodness, like they treat it like this resolution. But of course, that's not how, you know, queerness works. In any case, there is another actor named Yoo Yeon-seok. He plays Chibong, the pitcher of Yonsei's baseball team. Quick shout out to Yonsei. I was a research scholar at Yonsei for 1 year during my Fulbright stint in Seoul back in 2009. So I see you, Yonsei. And Yonsei and Korea University or Korea대 have this rivalry that's similar to UCLA and USC's rivalry. Interestingly, Yonsei's colors are blue and white, and UCLA's colors are blue and yellow. And both Korea University and USC's colors are red. Isn't that funny? I mean, that's interesting only to me. It's not interesting to you. Yoo Yeon-seok is also an actor you might recognize. He plays the younger version of the villain in that movie Old Boy. He's very versatile. You have Kim Sung-gyun playing a college student on this show, but of course he plays the goofy dad in Reply 1988. And it's a big jump. He's very versatile. This show plays a lot of Seo music. For people who have a 90s nostalgia, they definitely recognize the music that this show plays over and over again, covered by artists that are more well-known in our contemporary like Sung Si-kyung, Roy Kim, B1A4, Dia, and others. I find this show really interesting in the way that it explores extreme fandom. So you have the character Cho Yoon-jin, played by Min Do-hee, who is obsessed with Seo and boys, and she takes extreme measures to express her fandom, like going on a hunger strike when she finds out that Seo is going to retire, or going to Seo house, or going to his dressing room, right? Like zero boundaries. Back when the Beatles were popular, well, not popular. I mean, the Beatles are always popular. Back when the Beatles were popping off, okay, when they were first emerging, the fandom that ignited over their music was it was like nothing anybody had seen before. And that similar phenomenon was happening in the early mid 90s with Seo and boys, and Korea had never seen anything like that before. So while Seo was at their highest success point, a lot of Korean news outlets would release ridiculous stories on how Seo music was like devil worship. They would speculate on Seo sexuality. They would make all kinds of weird rumors and then put it out in the news. And it would create this sort of moral panic with the parents. And the parents would be like, you know, like arguing with their teenage kids or their college kids about like what they listen to, what they wear, blah, blah, blah. And I don't understand it, honestly. I don't understand why it had to be that way, but that's how it used to be. In the early 90s in South Korea, that's how it went down. Okay. Seo group retired and they disbanded in the mid 90s, I think 1996, but he returned to pursue a solo career in 1998 with nu metal rock. And I remember this one song called Orange, which shocked the hell out of me when I first heard it because it was so drastically different from his earlier albums that he did with the group. Many of you know that Yang Hyun-suk, the former CEO of YG Entertainment, was part of the Seo boys group. Yang is in a whole heap of trouble in light of the Me Too movement in Korea and with former trainees coming out and saying how he'd threatened them and mistreated them. I mean, he's a goddamn mess. I'm not going to get into it. You read the news, so I'll leave that work to you. You also see the kinds of TV shows that these characters are watching. So they're watching the show called 마지막 승부, The Last Game, and it's the first Korean drama you see the family watching all together, right? And Chang Dong-gun is in that show, and that was a really popular drama back in the day, and it focused on basketball players. And this show also explores the IMF crisis and how it impacted families in the late 90s, especially the job market, especially the young people's dreams and visions and goals and yada, yada, yada. The economy in South Korea and the difficulty that the middle class faced back then, that has not really changed to this day. I'm going to talk about that some more in the next episode of this podcast, so let's hold off on that conversation until next week. All in all, I really, really love this show. I liked the diversity it had in terms of regions and dialect, regional competition and rivalry between Jeollado and Gyeongsangdo. Okay, that's like a real rivalry. All right, the non-Seoul folks and their defensiveness whenever Seoul people called them country folk. I think that's hilarious. The 90s fashion, okay? The World Cup games, the rah-rah attitude that Koreans had overall back then. It's all fiery and fun, and I dig it. I will say, though, I did not appreciate this show's homophobia, especially with the guest cameo appearance with actor Hong Seok-chun. Hong Seok-chun is the only openly gay celebrity in South Korea at this time, and the show makes this really bizarre assumption that gay men will just hit on anybody and everybody who is male, and it's just sad to me that Hong felt the need to even play this role based on how it was scripted. But this is like a very typical stereotype that queer men are are subjected to, like, you know, the assumption being, well, all gay men are hypersexual and all gay men are predatorial. You know, like these are stigmas that the gay community faces, and it's ridiculous that it continues, but it's got to stop. There's so much we learn about South Korea's recent globality. So like in episode 5, we see the family sitting together eating a melon, okay? Like cuz Chilbong, because he's like so successful and he's a celebrity, la la la, he brings a melon to the house, right? And they share this melon together, and it's like a whole big event for everybody, because it's like, they're like, oh, I'm eating a melon for the first time. I've never had a melon like this. Da, da, da. The melons were very rare back then. And bananas were also rare. I think I talked about this on this podcast when I was talking about Reply 1988, but bananas were this exotic fruit that was very, very rare and hard to come by in Korea. So you know how there's banana milk? Like if you're Korean, or if you've been to Korea, if you've been to like a Korean spa or sauna, they always have banana milk there. And banana milk was invented by this milk company called Pingure, and they invented it in the 1970s, this thing called banana milk, because bananas were a privileged fruit that only the wealthy could afford to eat. And Pingure, uh, the same company that invented banana milk, created this ice cream bar called Melona, which is a melon flavored popsicle, and it makes melons accessible to all income levels, right? And that was happening in the mid 90s. So it's not too long ago when melons were considered exotic. It's not too long ago when bananas were considered exotic in Korea. And it's amazing how we in the United States, or we in developed nations today, take for granted so many things. So like even something as simple as limes. Limes, okay? 10 years ago, every time I ordered a tequila in Korea, they would always give it to me with a lemon. Like there were just no limes. Limes were hard to come by. 10 years ago, hard to come by fresh blueberries. You couldn't find just like a carton of blueberries in Korea. Today, you could find them. They're a lot more common, a lot more accessible. They're still expensive though. So if you look at the history of fruit companies in the United States and the militarism and the neocolonialism that Americans exercised in Latin America for things like bananas, even with things like bananas, we can see traces of coloniality and US empire and imperialism. But isn't that funny? Isn't that funny that South Korea associated these kinds of fruits with wealth and America, even though these were technically stolen or taken away from Latin American countries? The other thing I love about Reply 1994 is how much they play Mariah Carey's Without You over and over again. Like, it's like one of my favorite songs of all time. I sing that song every time I go to noraebang with my Korean friends. You can ask my Korean friends. They'll be like, yeah, Grace sings Mariah Carey's Without You a lot. Today's guest is Dr. Todd Kushigemachi. He is a lecturer at UCLA in the Department of Film, Television, and Digital Media Studies. He is a friend and former colleague of mine at UCLA. I met Todd back in 2015 when I first moved to Los Angeles and started out as a wee little master's student. And he was always really nice to me. He was always super helpful whenever I had questions. He and I went to see a lot of movies together. We had many lunches together, and we taught a few courses together as fellow TAs. And I always learn a lot from Todd. Okay, I like how dedicated Todd is to his students and his teaching. And I really like how rigorous he is in his research. And he's a stand-up guy through and through. And folks, I do have the flashcard series for this show, and it's going to be at the tail end of this episode, right after my conversation with Todd. And it's going to be with fellow comedian Nick Borsellino. He's very funny, very sweet guy. And I shot our video segment in front of a comedy club today, and it's very noisy and it's outdoors. So please excuse the noise level, but it is a good little flashcard series. So enjoy that. But for now, let's talk to Dr. Todd Kushigemachi. Cool. Good to see you, buddy. How are you?
It's good to see you. Are we now live? Are we now recording?
Yeah, we're recording. Not
How
live,
exciting.
but
I know, not live,
yeah.
but I'm pretty good. It's the end of almost the end of like the quarter/semester, so things are wrapping up. Looking forward to the winter.
Where are you teaching right now?
I'm teaching 6A History of the American Motion Picture at
Very nice.
UCLA again, and then I'm still finishing up that class at Woodbury University, Television and Race in America. I have to ask a question. I've seen your studio on the videos of your past things. Is that just like a decked out room in your apartment, or?
This is my closet, dude.
Okay, that's what I meant. Yeah.
decked out room. I live in a studio, bro. I have like no space. Um, you know what's interesting about living in these like smaller units is you have to buy extra storage units in order to make more space. That's like the weird
Okay.
ironic thing I realized. Like, yeah, that's the urban life thing. It's like, where do I put my shit? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, it never occurs to me to just be like, how about you just stop buying shit, Grace? Because you don't have the room for it, you know? But
Yeah,
yeah.
no, the reason why I ask is because it's quite professional looking. So the first time I saw it, I was like, is she like renting a
Ah,
room? But now I just
yeah.
dispelled that potential illusion for
Yeah.
other
Technically
listeners. So,
technically, I am renting a room. I'm
oh,
renting
that's
this
true.
entire unit, and
Yeah.
this is just one segment of it.
Yeah, to be honest, I have not delved into the world of podcasts that much. I
You
think
don't listen to podcasts?
not really.
Wow.
I have a podcast app, but literally the only thing I listen to is NPR. Wait, wait, don't tell me. I think
Yes.
I've talked about a lot.
Uh-huh, yeah.
So it's basically a radio show that happens to be distributed in the form of a podcast.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it seems like a whole Pandora's box of like
It
for better or worse.
is.
Yeah.
It actually really is. It's like trying to find a podcast to get into is like trying to get into a new series on any one of these millions of platforms that have their own
Hmm.
original content. It's like very overwhelming because there's so many podcasts. During the pandemic, because all these comics just were going bonkers because they couldn't get stage time, they all started podcasts. Like it was like the great upsurge of podcasts during the pandemic, and I being one of them.
Yeah, I
And
was about to ask. I think that sounds like you. Is that what happened? Though
I was, yeah,
yours is focused. Didn't it also come up around the same time that you were teaching your K drama class? And is that sort of
yes,
why sort of the framing of it?
kind of. Like, well, the K drama class was in the spring, so it was going to start in January. But I started my podcast, I started recording it in December, but I had been
Mm-hmm.
planning it since the fall. Like, so all through the fall, I was planning it. I was originally supposed to do it with some other person, like one other person, but like, yeah, it's just we couldn't work together. I was like, yeah, I have to do this alone. And yeah, like, you know, I, I was just kind of thinking about this recently. I was like, why did I do this podcast? Like, other than like the like more obvious reasons, the surface reasons being like, oh, it's about Korean dramas and I know Korean dramas and also I'm a comic, so I want a podcast. And other than those reasons, I think I had to show myself that I'm capable of doing something that is um that is something I want to do, but it's intimidating because I don't know anything about it, like how to do it. All of it is like from scratch. All of it is like, I mean, I had to buy all this shit, I had to buy this, I had to buy this, you know? And this wasn't the first mic I used. This wasn't the first headphones I used. You know, a lot of it was trial and error. And like, a lot of it, like every step was full of fear and self-questioning and self-doubt and anxiety, but I pushed through all of that and I did it anyway and I launched it
Mm-hmm.
anyway. And I think I just needed to show myself that I'm capable of doing something that I want to do but I'm afraid of doing, you know? And so I would say that's the more of the reason why, if
I
that
think
makes
this is
sense.
speaks to a pretty big difference between the two of us. Is that you're like when you hit those things that you're interested about, you're like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna challenge myself. And I'm always like, I walk the opposite direction. I'm like, okay, nice try. That looks good for other people. We're just very different in that respect. I'm an overly cautious person, and you're a very ambitious person, which is a good thing.
Well, I mean, I think there are benefits to both, you know, and you're not overly cautious. I mean, I would say you take risks in other aspects, you know.
Yeah, in some
I mean,
ways. Whether
what did you say? Like trying to be an academic right now is a huge risk.
no, that's true. That's true. It really is. I mean, because I mean, this week, this was literally the strike week. I had to send out emails to my students at UCLA because the strike was authorized on Wednesday and Thursday for UC lecturers.
The
Um,
adjunct strike.
yes, use adjunct strike for UC lecturers, and it was called off Wednesday morning, I think.
Damn.
And so, which speaks to, just like the precarity of like, adjunct life. And it was, I think those, um, even though the strike didn't go through, a valuable learning lesson, because even in my email, I had to explain like, I am a lecturer and you might not know this distinction, but most of your classes are taught by people who are technically like gig workers.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it's one of those things that I think some students know, and maybe they know in the back of their minds, but they're not aware of the fact that, yeah, most of us
Yeah.
like don't have health
Well, yeah.
insurance from UCLA, or the fact that like when they tell, "Are you going to teach a class next year?" I'm like, I don't
I
know.
have
I hope
no
so.
idea. Yeah.
Maybe, but
God willing.
yeah, yeah.
It's well, okay, so the strike didn't happen then, or it did happen? What's
I think it was. I think with all strikes, the ultimate goal is to force the hand of
Yeah.
somebody perceived to be not negotiating good faith, and so,
Okay.
and I think basically there were like marathon negotiations on Monday and Tuesday
Yeah.
with the president's. I think was it Drake, his team, and then yeah, and so basically they ended up like, I think it was like early morning Tuesday slash early morning Wednesday slash late Tuesday that
Yeah.
they came to an agreement. So basically avert the strike. I think that's what the purpose was always with the strike, is to try to not get to that point.
Mm.
But yeah, yeah.
I'm glad that adjuncts have a union. I mean, I think there is like it's like a North American like lecturers or adjuncts union or like organization or collective. I think something of that kind of thing exists, but um, I wish that would be stronger, and I wish everybody who graduates from grad school it just becomes like privy to that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I wish that would just be part of that whole process. Being like, once you graduate, instead of just being okay, you've graduated, good luck, like which is what professors do.
Yeah.
Instead of doing that, like being like, okay, here are the steps, like join this union or go to this organization, know your rights, understand the lay of the land, and this is how it's going to be, so that like all adjuncts feel empowered to know that like as a collective, once all of us walk out, the universities are fucked,
Yeah.
because a lot of these professors who are tenured are not in classrooms. They're sitting in admin positions and they're not teaching and making a lot of money from it. But these adjuncts who are paid ridiculously low, like very, very low pay, like they can't survive on this kind of pay, no health care, no benefits, no retirement, nothing. And 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 for grad students to just go and be like, okay, yes, 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 like bowing their heads, being like, oh, I'm so grateful for this, oh, for the morsels of food you're giving, rather than do that, to literally be like, if all of us said no and walked out, they'd all be screwed. Like I wish that would be part of the programming too. That's
Yeah.
important.
I kind of feel like the system is weird too, because I feel like if one day we just said, like, let's start all over again. We all took a step
Yeah.
back,
Right.
and the university thought through it. They would probably find a way that would allow not only for more sustainable careers for adjuncts and for
Yeah.
I shouldn't say adjuncts, for lecturers,
Right.
but
Right.
then it would be a system that runs smoother. But I think just because it's always moving so fast, they're always just trying to plug in holes of like, it's like, instead of replacing the pipes, they just keep on. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I think even the
Yeah.
UCs, it's not like they would benefit from a system that was more sustainable than, even my Woodbury gig. That was a job. Luckily, it was a good opportunity, I think, for the other person. I think they got offered a more tenure track job, or a job with a tenure track possibility. But then as a result, you have to then bring in someone last minute. And it's like,
Yeah.
I think we wouldn't have to have those last minute assignments if we had more stable things for people in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of that thinking does stem from this belief, this ridiculous belief that arts and humanities courses are not valuable, that
Hmm.
they're not viable. But the fact is, they are. They're very necessary. Like I remember when I was an undergrad. Were you an English major as an undergrad or film major?
I was a journalism major.
Oh, right. That's right. You worked at
So
Variety and stuff.
I technically have a bachelor's of science in journalism, which is
Right.
weird, but yeah.
Right, right. That's funny. So you're a scientist. Oh, that's so funny. You know what though? Journalists, they kind of are scientists in a way.
I think that's what the hope is always, right? Because if they're like, the objectivity, sort of the way that's always the myth of journalism, of course. But
That whole, I feel like journalism as a whole entire industry and field needs to be upturned, honestly.
mm,
Uh, like I'm gonna just go off track real quick. I was interviewed a bunch of times by journalists the last like month or so because of Squid Game, right?
oh, okay.
And
You're the
I
go-to Korean drama person now. You're like
I guess for
the
Squid
expert.
Game, it's like the only Korean drama that anybody gives a shit about for some reason. But
Yeah.
they the questions they ask me are so stupid and so like they try to pretend like they're not motivated by their own personal biases, but the way that they
Mm,
frame their questions, it's so obvious and blatant how their biases are embedded in there. You know,
hmm
like okay, in Berlin, there's this it's like a German NPR. So if you were living in Germany, you'd be
Okay.
listening to them. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's German's public radio, and they were the interviewer was like, "Is socially aware or socially conscious TV shows like Korean dramas like is this like a new thing?" Like, and I was like, "What? Like what?" um, he's like, "Yeah, like I mean, for instance, like romantic dramas. I know a lot of Korean dramas are like romantic dramas." I was like, "You don't think romantic comedies have social awareness?"
hmm
And he was like, "Well," and I was like, that says more about you right now."
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I would. It sounds more like that person didn't do. I mean, I don't know the person, and I don't want to make assumptions, but
Yeah,
usually the journalists, like the way
yeah,
I was trained, at least, you're like supposed to
yeah.
over prepare, and it sounds like
Ah, yeah.
this person did not prepare. This like
Underprepared.
yeah,
Very
I think that's the
underprepared.
bigger issue.
Like,
Yeah.
and it doesn't make me feel good, and it doesn't make me want to like, it doesn't make me excited when the journalist keeps saying, "Yeah, like, obviously you're the expert on this, and I know nothing about this." And when he presents every single question starting with that in the beginning, it makes me want to disrespect him blatantly and be like,
hmm
"If you don't know jack shit about this, are you even interested in this? Was it just an
hmm
assignment given to you? Is this whole discussion a waste of time?" I also didn't like the way he was like, "So, do you mind recording, like, your voice with your own equipment on your end?" There wasn't like it wasn't like, "Please." It wasn't like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but, it would help if" it was just, like, very, like, "Just do this. Use your equipment and do this." And that pissed me off too. It's like, what if I don't fucking want to, Or what if I don't have equipment? I mean, that's not the case, but it was just like I didn't like his sense of entitlement, I guess.
mm
I think that sort of got us off on the wrong foot, and I just didn't like how his questions were implying that romantic comedies couldn't possibly have social awareness or be, yeah, like socially conscious because fucking romantic comedies or soaps written by women in Korea, most of them are written by women,
hmm
always, always question the status quo.
hmm
Always.
hmm
Like every single romantic Korean drama is about saying no to the man. And like his question was so like absurd and it showed such a huge blind spot that I was like annoyed.
So was this for a broadcast format? Like would have been for radio or for
Yeah, it would
like
have been for radio, like,
wow.
the way they do it is like, this is Germany, so what they do is they'll take interviews, and then they'll dub it into German. So they have to
Oh
go and
yeah. Okay.
translate, and they dub it. So some German woman is gonna be speaking like me, basically, and, it was just
And
I just yeah.
making you sound less annoyed. You're like,
Yeah, I'm
all
sure.
your inflections have been removed.
Oh God, it's all gone. It's all gone.
Yeah. No, I was just curious because I felt like if it was sometimes in print journalism, I can understand like they're just asking questions to get you to say certain things that can fit into
Yeah.
the story. But that's
Yes.
really bad if in like in a context where you have to have a conversation, they didn't come in prepared. I
Yeah.
remember I once had I can't remember who it was, um, but I can't, maybe it was a student actually who talked about how like when they got interviewed, they felt used.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like they kind of go in there, they get what they need, and then they're
And
like,
they
okay,
bounce.
bye, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Peace out.
Um, which I think in when you're dealing with people like celebrities or politicians,
Yeah.
that's what they're used to, and they probably prefer that. But when you're speaking to people who are, just
Who
want to have
don't
a
have a
conversation,
publicist. Yeah.
mm-hmm,
Yeah. Who don't
yeah,
have the PR training, right? Because,
mm-hmm,
like, as you say, celebrities and politicians, they have a publicist, they have a PR agent who trains them in how to deal with all kinds of questions, all kinds of scenarios. But it's like, I'm some chick, who does a bunch of things. I don't know. I just decided, I was like, I'm going to be a lot more selective when I say yes to interviews and stuff, like a lot more selective because it takes a lot out of me, like emotionally and mentally. Because the way that they're conducting it, like I just see the problems already, just based on how they're asking me questions.
mm-hmm.
And like the way I answer it like, why would you ask? Like, so not cooperative. Like I'm
Yeah,
so not cooperative. I'm sure they're having a hellish time too. They're like, why won't she just answer it yes and no? Because I'm like not built like that. I'm like,
mm-hmm,
you're avoiding all the nuances and all the ambiguities of this layer here. And it's like annoying the bejesus out of me. Let me give you the full context. And that was the other thing. He was like, "Oh, I listened to your podcast and I liked what you were saying about it. So can you talk more about?" I was like, I already answered that on my podcast. It's like you could just literally rip that soundbite from my podcast and insert it. Like, why are we like rehashing this here right now? Anyway,
mm-hmm.
that's my point. I feel like journalism should be totally changed, like in every
Yeah.
which way.
I still remember this one conversation we had once where I can't remember what the context of the conversation was, but you were basically describing your anarchy view of how the world should be. And you then said that I would abolish journalism and the main means of communication would be like
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
And I remember I stood up. I've been brainwashed properly into being a good. No, we need a body.
Information. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I still
No,
remember that. I was like, that's very
I
interesting
think
though.
it was extreme. I was like, there wouldn't even be phones. You would literally have to walk to your neighbor's house and look at them in the eye. Like it would have to be
Mm,
like that. You know what I mean? Like, um, but there is a part of me that still believes in that. Like I still very much believe in that kind of thing. Um, but the upside for me, at least with media, is that like I get to be a lot more selective when it comes to how I want to interact with people, because like
mm-hmm.
eh, I'm sure you can relate. Like there's a side of me that's enormously introverted, and um if I don't want to deal with people, like a lot of people at once by like going out and like, because with that you have less control, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
all these people. But if I just want to talk to somebody, like one person that I feel the most safe with, or somebody that I know won't bring me down today or won't stress me out, then I know who to contact and just say hello because we are social creatures and we have to have social interactions. So I guess that is the upside to it. But of course, there are like all these other downsides to selective contact and information in media as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
I still dream about that kind of world, man.
I think like journalism is important. I have very much shied away from social media these days. I'm pretty much like
Yeah.
not on social media
Good
anymore
for you. Yeah.
because
How do you feel? How do you feel? Do you
I
feel
mean
better?
it's been a while I think so. I think the straw that broke the camel's back for me was the 2016 election
Right.
and like misinformation, and then
Yeah.
just that kind of stuff is just really irksome to me. But then also
Yeah.
just even like it goes back to that one-on-one thing is much better. Like you can talk to somebody and then
Yeah.
you're going to say it in a way that was like, this is for this person. But
Yes.
like back in the day when I would like go on some random, like I don't know if I had some like snarky tweet I'd put up or something,
Sure.
then I'd always be like, what did anybody say anything? Not in a like a I needed validation, but it's like, did I upset anybody? Or like, what is this person
Oh,
gonna say?
yeah.
Am I gonna have to get into a Facebook debate about this?
Yeah.
And it's
So it's
those
like
yeah.
throwing out a potentially toxic thing to see who's gonna bite, and whose
Yeah.
mind am I gonna change today? Like
Yeah.
that kind of
Well,
thing.
it's not even that. It's like
Yeah.
in the moment, I I think part of it is a lot of times with social media, people are saying things just for themselves, right? They're just like
Yeah.
putting it out there. And
Yeah.
then once it's out there, and then I realize, oh, someone could read this and
Right.
disagree with me in a way. It's not even like I want to change your mind. It's not even like I want to start that fight, but then it just happens. And
Huh.
so, and also in general, even when I do post on social media, it's just, I mean, back in the day, I used to be like, I think people used to think of me as a contrarian, and I think I did maybe cultivate that personality to an extent,
Yeah,
intentionally
you
or
did
not.
have that. You did have that side to you.
Yeah.
I remember like you wrote something like, "I've had." You're like,
What is this?
you're like, "I've had In-N-Out burgers and Shake Shack, and my opinion is that In-N-Out burgers are superior," or something like that. You're like, "In-N-Out burgers are better." Like
I
that's
don't
what you
think
had said.
that's. I don't think that was me. It's possible though. I'm not gonna actually probably
It
before
was
this
you.
year would have. I'm not sure if that was me.
This was a few years ago. It was definitely you. And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "I like In-N-Out burgers," but I was like, "In-N-Out fries taste like shit,
Uh,
and Shake Shack fries are just slightly better, and therefore I would go to Shake Shack." And, yeah,
My
I
big
just
thing
yeah.
that would probably still be my preference, but isn't In and Out like anti-vaccine mandate?
Well, In-N-Out is also a very Christian organization.
Yes. Which unfortunately also means these days highly political, right? Because like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the contemporary evangelical Christianity has basically thrown in their lot the um, with the right, the Republican right, in a way that doesn't actually make sense in terms of the political and religious ideology matching up is not inherent. But yeah, that's my big thing about In and Out these days is that they're very against the vaccine mandates, especially in California. And
Yeah.
so and then I'm like, I haven't
You
had
know
Chick-fil-A in years. I will say that.
Yeah, I haven't had Chick-fil-A since I was in Georgia, but I haven't, had In-N-Out burgers in a long time only because those drive-through lines are just way too fucking long, and I'm just
Mhm.
like, it's just not worth it. As much as I love their burgers, it's just not for me, sitting in that drive-through line is just not worth it anymore, so that's why I don't go. But,
Yeah.
it's funny, like, this whole church and state thing, it's like, it was never, ever separate. Like, church was always part of a politicized
Mm.
agenda forever. Like, and
Mm-mm.
I don't know why people believe this to be a segregated thing. It's not. It's like, oh my god, it goes way back to the beginning of America, to Rome, like, it's way back, and so, yeah, I don't buy into the separation of these institutions. It's to me, it's
That's
always had a mutual it was a marriage. It was always a marriage.
For sure. I think no, in terms of course, absolutely the
Yeah.
role of religion in the state. I mean, of course, like the Crusades and just going
Yeah.
back to those types of things.
Yeah.
I think I was thinking more about just what's interesting to me is sort of the way in which the alignment of like evangelical Christianity by and large, not entirely,
Yeah.
but it's almost like the politics dictate the theology, like the
Yeah.
party politics dictate theology in a way
Right.
that doesn't always make organic sense to me if you actually have like read the Bible or something. So it's
Exactly.
that's what's more interesting to me. But you're totally
Yes.
right, of course. Even like
Yeah.
the idea that the founding fathers were all believers is like it's true, but most of them weren't they like deists, which is like slightly different from like
Yeah.
what we think of as Christianity, and
Yeah.
in terms of its religious beliefs. I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just
Deists and like Freemasons and like
yes.
the whole thing,
Who know what else they were
aliens.
into? Yeah.
Yeah, who fucking knows? Eyes Wide Shut, Da Vinci Code. Hello, like it's like what? Who fucking knows? Who cares? It's like it was their own personal lives, right? And
National
all of it is
treasure.
National Treasure. Nicolas Cage. Hello,
Yeah.
right? Like that was
Mm-hmm.
their life. Tom
Yes.
Hanks. That was their life. It's like it's all of it is projection and gossip, and it's like who
Mm-hmm.
knows, but
Absolutely.
ultimately, right, and I'm sure you'd agree, is like um spirituality
Mm-hmm.
is for one's own personal freedom. Like they want to feel less burdened by the pain and the drudgery of life,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they pursue spirituality, which is oftentimes found in religious institutions. And sadly, a lot of these religious institutions, because they are so closely related to political institutions and economic institutions, their their guidance and leadership starts to muddle the vision of what spiritual living and practice and rituals are. And it saddens me greatly. Like, I mean, I don't know. Did you grow up in a Christian household or no?
Yes, very
You
much
did.
so. I grew up in. It's actually, I don't know if it's technically, I didn't even realize this until recently. It's
Yeah.
technically not a evangelical Christian denomination.
Okay.
It's American Baptist, not to be confused with the much
Wow.
more conservative Southern Baptist.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
so it's a different denomination. But yes, I grew up in a Christian household. So yes, I think that's why in particular I'm always thinking about sort of the relationship between
Yeah.
religion and politics.
Yeah.
And sort of the way in which it doesn't always make sense. It's sort of arbitrary. Like to me, like the whole thing about, I feel like there's this idea of, I think there was a lot of, I mean, because of this alignment of politics and religion, a lot of people in certain faith-based communities were like, you know what, I don't need to get the vaccine. I don't need to wear a mask. God will protect me. Which, if people believe that, it's hard to change their mind. But I also
Right.
like, even if you just think biblically, Noah still had to build the ark. Like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes you have to put a step forward. You're asked to do something to protect yourself. And so like, and
Right.
remember that everybody thought Noah was crazy. So it's just, it's like these types of things where I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not even biblical. This idea that God will protect me if I do nothing. That's like,
Huh.
that's not what it says there. I don't know.
Right.
This is why that
Right.
stuff really bothers me. Yeah.
Yeah. And, the other thing is like when people are seeking that kind of spiritual freedom, they're coming from oftentimes a place of hardship, trauma,
Mm-hmm.
poverty, difficulty. And therefore, when they come into religion, they're often in a place of resignation and surrender. And so they're
Mm-hmm.
totally open like this, wide open, because they're like, I'm at a total loss. I'm giving it all up to God. And when a person with a motivation enters that kind of being, it can be
Mm-hmm.
very dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
If and when that leader says to this person, well, God forgives you, God is here for you, here's a donation from our church to help you out with your medical expenses or your children's clothes or whatever, because Christianity is based on a lot of charitable a charitable ideology, and charity is a big part of the Christian doctrine, yeah. And they're like, oh my God, God saved me. I will do anything for God. Well, who's my vision of God? Well, it's this person right here. And this person is telling me that the vaccine is wrong, that it's anti-Christian to get a vaccine. Well, okay, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
not gonna, right? So that is what I find dangerous. And that's what I find heartbreaking,
Yeah.
because that person doesn't have spiritual freedom. They're just now like they're completely subordinated into a whole nother um doctrine, dogma,
Yeah.
a whole nother thing that is actually oppressing them, you know?
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah, it's also, I think, maybe goes back to your idea of, I mean, the merits of your no phone world, no social media world, is I think a lot of the people who are caught up in some of these politicized fights about things like vaccines and masks, if they had one-on-one conversations with somebody who was like, I lost somebody to this and it's been tough for me and I didn't believe it at first. It's one of those things that those conversations were actually happening one-on-one instead of through Facebook or, through whatever news
Right-wing
source they might be
radio.
getting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then maybe that's point one for Grace's no technology world.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Face to face is oftentimes better. Like
Yeah.
even like challenging conversations,
Mm-hmm.
Like all of us have relationships, different kinds of relationships with all different kinds of people, and therefore um like tension and conflict and disagreements will arise.
Mm-hmm.
But in this parasocial kind of uh relationship maintenance, it becomes far easier to just be like, well, okay, block, delete, unfollow,
Mm-hmm.
dismiss, get out, you know? And rather than do that, it's like, well, what if you guys just looked at each other and just said to each other, like, well, when I heard this, this is how I felt. Maybe that wasn't your intention, but that's how it came off. But I understand now that you're explaining your part. Like those kinds of conversations are easier to have in face to face, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the parasocial kind of world, because it's so easy to just get rid of people, having that face to face conversation, the thought of it, it becomes more scary for
Mm-hmm.
people, because it's like it was so easy to just get rid of them and just pretend like they don't exist anymore. Not even social media, but even phones. Be like,
Yeah.
I just delete or block their number and they're gone, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, but what are you losing? What other things are you losing? Not just not only on their end, but for yourself, potentially another a skill, another communication skill, like another um one more door for compassion, one more layer of understanding a different perspective now, like so much loss is happening out of that. And yeah, like honestly, it saddens me more than anything. Like I don't get mad about it. I just get really brokenhearted about it.
Yeah. It is sad too because I mean, and I should know that I'd probably guilty of this even just in what I've said so far, but I think oftentimes also because of this sort of this mentality, we often are judging people not based on who they are, but on this like imagined type. Because an example of this is like I feel like Gen Z, the youngins these days, like the people who are in
Yeah.
my classes, people see them as like this implacable woke mob that is going to cancel you right out the gate. And
Yeah.
maybe that's true to an extent, but I also feel like there's much more, just based on the classes I've taught, there's much more nuance there. There's
Yeah.
much more
Yeah.
flexibility that even
Yeah.
if that might be the dominant conversation,
Yeah.
people understand that there are gray areas and whatnot. And so it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's just again another idea, I think, in which we're being, when algorithms are forcing us to the most extreme versions of ourselves. And so that we're only aware of the most extreme version of the person that we don't agree with. So,
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Algorithms that take us to the most extreme versions of ourselves. That's beautiful. And I agree. I think these Gen Zers who are framed as the woke mob, I think what we also need to understand is they're terrified of
Mm-hmm.
themselves and what they're capable of onto themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid of getting canceled. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, they're terrified and they're always walking on eggshells because they don't ever, ever, ever want to say potentially the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is stressful as hell to be around. I feel like young people should be allowed to make as many mistakes as it takes for them to learn how to really become a genuinely good person. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And like young people aren't just born knowing everything being right and true. Young people are reacting to what was already there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like whatever our parents' generation put down for us, millennials reacted to and built.
And now the Gen Zers are reacting to that. So it's like, it's not, when we look at them, we can't just only look at them. We have to see ourselves, our parents' generation, their parents' generation, and see the terror and fear that they live in because of this construct that we built around them, which is yelling and screaming and traumatizing other fellow liberals.
Mm-hmm.
And that shit needs to fucking stop. I really want to, like, as a professor, create more room and space, breathing room for them to literally be, for them to know and be like, you can make mistakes here. What, like, quote unquote mistakes. You know, you can be yourselves here. It's okay. I'm not going to lash out on you. I'm not going to let anybody in this room lash out on one another. It's okay for you to try out an idea that you feel like, oh, is this risky? If it's risky, be brave. Go ahead, give it a shot. Let's hear it, you know? Because even like these potentially, you know, what people might consider as, well, that's fucked up or that's crazy. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there is a tiny morsel of a good idea in that bigger idea that they're presenting right now that we can use for a productive conversation. I know that to be true, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to bring more attention to that, the fear that they live in. I feel like that's what woke culture is right now, is it's motivated by fear. And that's not
Mm-hmm.
woke. That's just a reaction. It's
Yeah.
not wokeness.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think it's so true because about what you say about walking on eggshells and that fear. Because I think implicitly, uh, not specifically with you, but just any idea of like going onto a live recorded interview. I think that was always be in the back of my mind, like, oh, what if I say something? Because you're always seeing these headlines these days of something someone said in a podcast 5 years ago gets them removed from such and such.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and honestly, I have to admit, most of the times when that happens to somebody, I'm like, yeah, it's probably true that they probably should have been removed for that. But I think it's different in a space, especially academia, with younger people who are not public figures. They shouldn't have to have that same anxiety. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they shouldn't, because
yeah,
you're okay, and even you shouldn't have that anxiety because you're not a politician. Do you know what
I
I'm
know
saying?
for
You're
sure.
not you're not the president of the United States. Like, who
Yet, no, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. I have
if
no
you ran for
interest.
president, I would vote for you.
Well, thank
But
you.
it's like, you know, get a grip, man. You know, you're just a person. The only way to see oneself as a person is if you see other people as persons.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, for instance, this was like not that long ago, maybe a year ago now. Remember that young Black woman who became an editor of, was it Cosmo or Vogue? Like, she was like one of the youngest editors ever to become
Mm.
this editor of a major magazine. And because of some racist thing that she tweeted when she was a teenager, she lost that job and
Oh
she
yes,
was
I remember hearing about this. Yeah.
publicly
Mm-hmm.
shamed. I want to ask, how many regressive steps are we taking by doing that?
Mm-hmm.
She was a teenager. This was years ago. It's not who she is now. Is our past self who we are right now? It's not. The fact is, it's not. The fact is, we're always changing, constantly on a moment by moment basis. I mean, that's why people say be present, you know? I don't know. I found that to be extremely saddening because, like, doing that, it gives more power to the other side, honestly. You know? And what that means is we need to be more compassionate when it comes to the other side, people who make mistakes like that, you know? It's like, okay, well, that was their past. That's not who they are now. Let me just look at who they are now, what they're doing now. Do I disagree with what they're doing now? No? Okay, then it's okay actually. You know?
Yeah.
And how do you quote unquote forgive that, as if forgiveness is even a thing, like as if it's possible, you know? How do you quote unquote forgive that? Well, do I forgive myself for my past mistakes? Do I alleviate myself, or do I let myself off the hook for the mistakes that I made in the past? It starts with that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the thing I talk about the most on this podcast, is the only way to stop criticizing and judging others for what they do is once I stop doing it to myself. The only way that I'm going to be little more loose and lax with others and their mistakes is once I forgive myself for my own mistakes. It's never only external. It's always it's physics, right? It always goes both ways. And what's the fucking answer to that? You know, it's like you got to work on your fucking self. So my point is, mind your business. It's literally, that's like, mind your own fucking business. And I'm like, okay, Grace, that's a little aggressive. How do you say it in a nicer way? How do you say it in a nicer way? And the nicer way is, your business needs tending to, and the only person who could tend to it is yourself. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, once I take care of myself and everything's cool, only then will everything around me be cool. Only then will I be able to go out and help others be cool. As long as I'm not cool, I can't do it the other way. I put that in my teaching statement too. Like in the last paragraph, I'm like, the only way that I could actually be a good teacher to them is if I know that I'm taking care of myself. So this is how I take care of myself. And I wrote out what I do to take care of myself. And it's like, I feel like a lot of professors lack that. Adjuncts, lecturers lack that because they're so fucking busy and they're so fucking, like, it's like deadlines and it's like syllabi, quizzes, grading, no time, It's like, well, make it possible for us, man. We want to be good teachers. We want to be good leaders. We want to really nurture and nourish these young minds and put them out into the world, not as angry people, but as compassionate people who understand the reality of what the fuck is going on and who want to go out and do good, who want to do the right thing, not be motivated and driven by only fear. Because if they do that, they can go in all different kinds of fucking direction. That's chaos. That's anarchy. But I feel like that's what our institutions are doing right now.
It's kind of interesting that you described sort of your philosophy in terms of like taking care of yourself, because I feel like with me, it's I think in some ways it's different, because I think in some ways I allow, like I just talked about sort of the way in which people are more complicated, they're more nuanced and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I feel like in some ways I'm harder. Yeah, maybe it's side of the flip side of what you're saying. I'm harder on myself. Like I allow other people certain affordances that I wouldn't allow myself, that I hold myself to this like absurd standard. And so like when I go to therapy, like one of the main lines I always hear from my therapist is be kind to yourself. And I think that's a very common thing about anxious people, is that even in a logical span, if they took a step back, if they made a mistake, and if somebody else made that mistake, they'd be like, oh, that's not a big deal, who cares? But then when you make that mistake, it's like, well, how could I have made this mistake? And it's like yeah, I mean, and then that's I think very much, I mean, I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and I think that's very much that. Like, you're obsessing over like stupid things like this thing that you might have dropped on the ground, and it's so it's kind of interesting that I think we both have a similar, they're like two sides of the same coin. But that edit, I have to say, the editor, the thing about that too, and the thing I always like to stress with my students, especially in this television and race in America class that we're teaching, is that sometimes when things happen like that, it's not because the company made the decision that that was the right thing to do, but because that was the thing that would stop the publicity. In some ways, it's more American business impulse to protect itself. And it's very similar just to see in terms of the evolution of perspectives on, like, kneeling during football games. Colin Kaepernick did it, and he was like persona non grata. Nowadays, like Nike commercials have talking about Black Lives Matter and stuff. It's just I always try to stress to my students, like, even though it looks like, oh, this happened because this is justice, maybe it was justice to certain people, and then maybe sometimes those things need to happen. But usually the business does it because it's better for business.
Exactly.
And then people then think, though, oh, they did it because they were committed morally. And then, like, that's usually not the case.
Never. It's never, ever, ever the case.
Yeah.
I was reading this book called Neoliberal Feminism, and it's about that. I mean, but that's what's happening with Black Lives Matter right now. It's like these movements get commodified by corporations. They become corporatized. As soon as that happens, like, it's gone. As soon as that becomes acquired by a corporation, it's gone.
Yeah.
it's like it's no longer the point. The essence of that purpose is gone. Why? Because now it's tied to capitalistic profit motivation. And once profit motivation comes in, that thing dies. Because it's like, think about, why did slavery begin? Because of profit motivation. So it doesn't fucking work. They can't ever work together, you know? That's why, yeah. We just need to go. I've been rewatching Fight Club over and over again.
Fight Club? Are you saying we need a Fight Club world? Wait, what are you? Or are you thinking about the end with the credit card companies? Like, where is this coming?
Well,
where are you going with this?
Well, first of all, it's a great movie. I don't care what people say.
I love that movie.
It's such a good movie, and I just
Yeah,
find
I haven't seen it in a while, but I love it.
Oh, revisit it.
Okay.
I just enjoy the movie because it's like a tasty movie. I just enjoy everything about it. I love the lighting, like that blue-green hue it has. I love Helena Bonham Carter. She's so good in that movie. Edward Norton's amazing in that movie. Brad Pitt is hot in that movie. Like, Jared Leto gets his face fucked up in that movie.
Jared Leto's in that movie?
Yes! Are you kidding me?
Jared Leto is one of those people that I don't think I realized he existed until like Dallas Buyers Club. But then I realized he's been around all along. It's kind of like the plot twist. Jared Leto was there all along. Because I also didn't watch. I recently watched all of My So-Called Life. He's the main love interest in My So-Called Life. Yeah. And so, but yeah, wow, I'll have to see Jared Leto.
Now you gotta watch it with a whole new lens. Yeah.
Have you seen Jared Leto in the House of Gucci trailer?
Okay, I have not seen the trailer. I don't want to see any trailers. I just want to go and experience the movie.
Oh, okay.
Because the casting is just so amazing that I'm just like, I just gotta walk in and let it happen, you know?
Yeah.
I already bought a ticket to go see Licorice Pizza.
Ooh, I just saw. I saw the trailer for that ahead of. I'm curious. Have you been going to the movies pretty regularly? Back like the movie theater?
Not really. I went to see 3 movies this past year to see movies. So I went to see Spencer most recently.
Oh, the Pablo Larraín film, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because I haven't seen it yet. We saw Neruda together, I think.
Did we?
I think we did.
I don't remember anything about it.
Yeah, we saw. I'm pretty sure we saw it together it was at the Lamley Royal.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't remember the movie that well either, but I
don't remember a single thing about that movie.
Yeah.
But it rings a bell. You and I watched a lot of movies together. We watched The Square, right?
Oh yes.
I love that movie. I love that filmmaker.
So you saw Spencer, okay?
I saw Spencer. I saw. What else did I see? Oh, I saw Titane.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that. I know somebody. I'm not gonna say who it is because I don't want to like embarrass them. But I know. I'll tell you offline. Okay. Somebody we both know who like basically almost blacked out during that movie. Like they almost like it was too intense.
Movie. It's a very intense movie.
They had to like leave halfway through. Like they almost passed out.
It was overwhelming.
They semi passed out or something.
It's like a sensory enriched movie. It's very like it's very intense. But what a movie! I mean, you kind of like sensory films. Like, I mean, you love Mulholland Drive. You would love this movie.
I do want to see it.
Love this movie. I recommend seeing it in theaters if you're comfortable with it. Because it's not a very popular film, so there's like hardly anybody in the movie theater. But I saw Titane. And I know Spencer, I saw one more thing. I can't remember what's the other movie that I saw, but French Connection.
The
Wes Anderson movie.
Oh, French Dispatch.
French Dispatch.
Yes.
French Connection. Yeah,
I was no. You saw a revival of Gene Hackman with William Friedkin, which is cool. That's a great movie.
French Dispatch. Yeah, I saw French Dispatch.
I used to be really into Wes Anderson. And I remember, I still remember in college, I wrote a review for Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Oh.
and it was a very negative review, and
Okay.
I got eaten alive in the comments. People were like,
Oh, shit.
people like comments like, "Have you no sense of joy?" was
Yeah.
like people would say that to me. I'll also say
Wow.
that screening was pretty cool because that was at Northwestern, and I had to go all the way to downtown Chicago. Roger Ebert was in the theater.
Oh, that's so cool.
I mean, I didn't get to interact with him, but he
Yeah.
was there. I think A.O. Scott, I think, was still based in Chicago at that time
Wow.
at the movies. So
Big time boys when it comes
yeah,
to film reviews. Those are like the big ones. Them and
yeah.
like Manola Dargis. It's like those are the big three. Well, now it's big two because Ebert is no longer with us. But
yeah, it's so funny because I think
yeah.
the movies that we saw in theaters over the past year speak to how different we are.
Yeah. What did you see? Let me hear.
So
What you
I've only seen 3 movies. I mean, part of it is an anxiety thing. I like for me, it's like
It's
I
real.
just with the pandemic,
Yeah,
like
come
I
on,
used to
it's
go
real.
like almost like 50 times a year back
I know.
when we
True
were
cinephile.
like grad students.
Yep.
But now I went like 3 times. But it's
Yeah.
completely different things. I
Yeah.
saw F9, The Fast Saga.
Okay.
I saw that because, well, I was actually invited because the Bruin Film Society and undergrad student group had me interview Justin Lin over Zoom earlier this
Ooh.
year. And so then
Ooh.
when they had tickets, they asked me, and which was exciting. He
That's
wasn't at the
cool.
screening, but
Yeah.
both F9, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Uh-huh.
And I literally just saw No Time to Die, the new James Bond film.
Oh,
Because it's
wow.
funny, our sets of films couldn't be more different. But I think it speaks to
you have a big appreciation for blockbuster films, you know, like the franchise, like the Fast and Furious one, and like, you know, James Bond films. Like I think you have an appreciation for them. Whereas like, yeah, I just never. I don't think I watched a single James Bond movie from beginning to end. With the Marvel stuff, like I am into it, but I never got on the Shang-Chi train. I want to see Eternals though. That I want to see. Cause
that's probably next on my list. But I
yeah.
also the other weird coincidence that I realized is that all 3 films I saw were directed by Asian Americans.
Oh yeah, that is
yeah.
dope. I like that.
Justin Lin, Destin Daniel Cretton, and Cary Fukunaga. Yeah.
Oh, I love Cary Fukunaga. Yeah, that's dope. I love that there are so many more Asian American directors out there making big time films. I think that's good. That's a good thing. That's very much a good thing.
And Chloe Zhao. Yeah, it's a big year for Asian Americans directing Hollywood blockbusters. Even though she got eaten alive by critics, but
it's okay. I mean, whenever a woman directs one of those like big superhero movies, she always gets eaten alive. Like when Ava DuVernay directed that big blockbuster film, she got eaten
Wrinkle
alive.
in Time.
Yeah. And it's like, give them a fucking break, you know? Like, do you think the other Marvel movies that people made are fucking fabulous? It's like they all had issues, every single one of them, because they're blockbuster movies. Okay, it's not her fault, FYI. You know.
Yeah.
But women always get it the most because
and
they don't give them opportunities. Yeah, they don't give them opportunities, and it's like once they give them, like, you better not fuck this up. All this pressure, all this, you know, it's so fucking stupid.
We talked about this in my television class this semester because we watched All American Girl, and as a good example of, you know, if you have, I feel like the line was that this was the one Asian American family sitcom in primetime, and then because it wasn't well received, we didn't see one for like a couple decades. It's always that level of scrutiny on the first or the firsts.
The pressure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Margaret Cho got it from every single side imaginable. Not just Asian Americans. I mean, fucking, okay. Jeff Yang, Hudson Yang's father, fresh off the boat. Jeff Yang's a journalist. Jeff Yang used to write for The Village Voice. Okay. I read his review of All American Girl in the 90s.
Whoa, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Scathing review. Fucking tore her a new one. All right. And you know, it's like it's impossible for her to quote unquote do the right thing because nobody in the industry is letting her be herself. Nobody else in that casting was Korean. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Mhm.
None of the writers, none of the directors were Korean. How the fuck do they expect her to do anything right when everything is wrong and out of her control? But who's the face? Margaret Cho. So she gets
Yeah.
she gets the brunt of it. It's not, none of it is fair. And that's why it's like when these people write these comments in your Variety review, even the Variety review itself, it's like these are just people's opinions. And so why get mad at them? You know?
Yeah.
Like that's how I feel about it these days. I'm just like, they're just opinions, you know? And at the end of
Yeah.
the day, nobody's opinion really matters. You know? It
Mhm.
just doesn't. It doesn't. So whatever. But the reason why I was talking about Fight Club earlier.
Oh yeah, we veered off. Sorry.
No, it's like just to finish the thought. It's because
Yes, no, I wanted to hear that. Yes, I wanted to hear that.
it's a very psychedelic film, and
Ooh,
it's
okay.
also a very Buddhist film. It talks about
Interesting.
ego death. It talks about letting go. But of course, it contradicts that later when Brad Pitt's character becomes too like insane, you know.
Mhm.
But like the driving scene when they're like arguing and it's raining, and then
Mhm.
like Brad Pitt's like telling Edward Norton to just let go of the wheel so they could just let the car swerve off and crash. Like that conversation is such a Buddhist conversation about letting
Mm.
go and really coming to terms with the fact that you're gonna die and you have no control over that reality. So really let go. Like when people bark at one another and tweet and opinionate and da da da, I feel like all of that is just a reaction to this this I don't know, this alarm bell that's going off in us at all times, which is like we're faced with our mortality and we just
Mhm.
can't deal. And so we're always yelling and it's like, but we need a reason and we need a target. So it just ends up becoming Twitter. It ends up becoming comment box. It ends up becoming reviews or whatever, you know, arguments in the street, whatever. But it's like, just fucking come to terms with the fact that you don't have any control over that, you know? And actually, you actually have no control over your life, really. You know, it's just like
Yeah.
it can end at any time. Um, just focus on what you can do. You know, do you really want to be a good person? Okay, just go and be that. You know, this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's like the UC system right now, instead of changing the whole thing, they're just plugging holes.
Mhm.
And that's what cancel culture is. It's plugging holes. It's not
Mm.
actually changing anything.
I think that's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's only more sadness there. Um, but let me ask you, why are you no longer a fan of Wes Anderson? Is it because of Fantastic Mr. Fox?
No, I wouldn't say I'm no longer a fan of his. I
Oh,
just
okay.
not as boldly enthusiastic as I used to be.
Oh.
I mean, this Fantastic Mr. Fox, I remember not liking it very much,
Mhm.
and then I never saw Isle of Dogs because it just looked kind of racist. I'll
Huh.
see it someday. It just didn't look
Huh.
appealing to me.
It wasn't
Um,
racist. I mean, that's my position on it. It wasn't
mhm.
racist. Yeah.
And I think, yeah, just in terms of, I think like I prefer his earlier work because I know some people feel
Yeah.
very strong that
Yeah.
Moonrise Kingdom and Grand Budapest Hotel are like his his masterworks.
They are great. Yeah.
I do like both of those movies, but I
Yeah.
prefer like Rushmore, Royal
Oh,
Tenenbaums.
Rushmore's so good. Royal Tenenbaums is so good. I
Mhm.
watch Royal Tenenbaums every single holiday season because
Oh,
it's
it's
such a
interesting. I'm learning about your
great.
go-to movies. I don't
Yeah.
rewatch
I
movies that much,
really?
but
That's
yeah.
surprising. Are you serious? Like, how many
The
times have you seen Mulholland Drive?
Oh, that's one. Well, see that one. So here's the exception to that.
Yeah.
The main time in which I tend to rewatch films is when I'm watching it with somebody. Like where it'll be like, I
Oh,
want to watch a movie, and then let's watch that, and like we're trying to share it with somebody.
got
It's
it.
very rare for me on my own to repeatedly visit a movie. At least these days. When I was a kid,
Yeah.
I was much more common. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know
Oh,
why. It's just
interesting. Yeah, why not? Explore that, man. Because don't you think like revisiting a film that you love and finding more about it? Because like a film is rich, there's a lot in there, and there's a lot
mm,
that we miss in the first take. And to like, you know, again, like when I was rewatching Fight Club a few weeks ago, I was like seeing it from a whole nother perspective. I was like, oh, this is like a Buddhist film. This is like a psychedelic film. This is like, it's got all these other layers I haven't seen before when I first saw it when I was 15 years old, you know? So it's, for me, like rewatching a movie is like always a whole new experience for me. And I revisit movies I love over and over again all the time. Like the reason why I asked you about Wes Anderson, I was rewatching Julieta of the Spirits.
Oh, the
The,
Fellini film?
the
Yeah.
Fellini color film.
Uh-huh.
So like I'm a big fan of Fellini. I think you already
I
know.
love that film.
And that's such a beautiful movie. Like it's his first color film, right? Like his first film in color.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of maybe is there was a short or one of his anthology films he did something before them. I can't remember for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like his films they tend to be black and white. This is a color film, and it's with his wife, who we haven't
Mm-hmm.
seen in several, like in a while with his films, and then it's this one. And there were so many scenes in that movie that were like, I was like, oh, Wes Anderson was inspired by this scene. It was like very, very
Yes.
clear. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I was like, this, like fucking Wes Anderson just ripped this right out of Fellini's movie. There was so many moments like that when I was rewatching this. Um, but yeah, you know, with French Dispatch, I didn't really love it. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
that was just my next question. I was curious
yeah.
to see how you felt about it because.
I think the reason why people love Moonrise Kingdom and Grand Budapest Hotel is because that was his sweet spot in terms of where he was at in his career. Like he has enough respect and credibility to ask for a budget that he can actually work with
Mm-hmm.
comfort. And he's at a respectable level where he could literally ask anybody to be in his movies.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. Like Ray Fiennes is a huge fucking star. He got him. And so like I think those two movies came out at that time.
Mm-hmm.
With this movie, he's still at that level, but now it's too much. It's too much because his scale is more like Grand Budapest and Moonrise Kingdom level. Like that's where it should be contained at, like when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to his work. But now his money scale and his celebrity scale is like bloated up, and he just crammed in literally every single fucking starlet into that movie. And it's 3 movies. It's got 3 separate storylines going in 3 different
Mm.
acts, and it has another storyline through line going through it. So it's like too much. It's like overload. And I was like, yeah, I can't appreciate all the small things in his movies like I tend to, you know? Cuz like his art direction, his production design is so amazing, and like his writing ability I think is also great.
Mm-hmm.
The way he casts is also very unique, and how he works with his actors I think is also very unique, you know? And it was like hard for me to give it my focus, my full attention to all of those small nuances because it was just it was too much. And so, yeah, like French Dispatch was a bit lost on me
That's
personally.
interesting. Yeah, I feel like it's like there are a handful of directors who have gotten like Wes Anderson has become too Wes Anderson-y. Quentin Quentin Tarantino might have become too
Yeah,
Tarantino-y. It's
yeah.
like yeah. I mean, I still like. I mean, like both of them. Like
Oh,
they
yeah.
both do stuff that I like. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm always
well,
gonna respect them. It's just, you know,
yeah.
I'm
But
starting to see the problem of how money like can, you know, water down the artistry. Like,
mm-hmm.
again, it goes back to this question of choice. Is like you can say no, Wes.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's the power of having somebody to tell you no too. I mean, I guess it's like why
Oh,
having good collaborators is a good thing. It's just,
yeah. The
uh,
power or maybe the privilege of having
yeah,
somebody you trust and whose words you really trust and know to for them to be like no, and for you to go in okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Huh. Um, are there any Korean dramas that you watch or that you're into?
let's see. I have now watched one episode of Squid Game. So I have stepped closer to social relevance by doing so. Um, Yeah. I think the last time I talked to you, the problem is just like uh, I I sometimes will start things and then not finish them when it comes to
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah.
So I think I told you last time I'm about halfway through Crash Landing on You, which I
Oh,
love.
interesting. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then just things got busy. But the reason why I wanted to watch Squid Game is because I'm teaching that horror in East Asian cinemas class
Yeah.
next quarter, and I feel
Oh,
like
exciting.
the students that will be inclined to take that class will have definitely seen Squid Game. So I feel like if I
Oh,
haven't seen
yeah.
Squid Game, they'll be like, "What's
Yeah.
this? What's this loser? Why do we have to trust what he says? He hasn't seen Squid Game. Even my random relative has seen Squid Game."
Yeah.
Um,
It's
yeah,
become that. It's become like The Godfather, you know,
yeah.
like or Sopranos. It's like homework for you to
Do
live in
you like it?
society.
How do you feel about Squid Game?
I loved it. I loved Squid Game. When I saw it, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, this is super entertaining. I was like, I am entertained the whole time, you know? It was like one of those. And for me, like the biggest drive was I already knew the filmmaker's other movies and like
Oh, okay.
I was like into what he was trying to do. And I am a big fan of Lee Jung-jae, the actor, the lead.
Mm-hmm.
Like growing up, he was like the hot stud, like the hot stud, you know, the
Mm.
guy. And he was playing a loser in a TV show.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Lee
yeah.
Jung-jae doesn't do TV. Like he does films, like Korean cinema. That's what he's known for. He very rarely does TV. And when he does do TV, he plays like a prim proper hot stud. And so I was just shocked to see him play like this loserish guy and I just wanted to see like, oh, how's he flexing his acting muscles here, you know? Like that was really he was really the driving force for me. And I think
Yeah.
that's how most Koreans feel. Like, for them it's like they want to go see Lee Jung-jae, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's really funny
yeah,
because
I
I
enjoyed it.
remember. I'm pretty sure it was Squid Game. I think it was also the lead actor you're talking about. In terms of journalists asking stupid questions about things that they don't understand. I don't know if you
Yeah.
saw recently. I think it was him on a red carpet, and then someone asked him like, "What's it like now? Like not where people are recognizing you all the time?"
Oh
And
my
I think it was
god.
like his response was something to the effect of like, "Well, I'm actually just already very popular in Korea. It just maybe internationally now people recognize who I am, but like,
Yeah, not only in
um,
Korea, but like all of Asia.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's that's such an Americentric,
mm-hmm,
Hollywood-centric question, and a lot of journalists were asking me that shit too.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're like, "Why is Squid Game such a popular?" I was like, "Did you see the show? It's really fucking good." You
Mm-hmm.
know, like, why don't you question that when it comes to shows like The Sopranos? It's like everybody around the world saw Breaking Bad. Why? It's a really fucking good show. That's why. But they're like, "Oh, well, it's Hollywood, so yeah, duh." But is it? Did you know that it's actually possible to come up with good shit outside of Hollywood, and that it actually has been happening for a really long time, all the time? You know, like I always threw that back at journalists. I rewatch Fellini films all the time, and that's not in English,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's an old movie. What do you know? It's because it comes from this mentality, like, well, it's impossible for these fucking Asians to possibly come up with anything good, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm not to defend the people because I didn't hear the specific question. So I do think sometimes people are curious of because American culture is so American centric. When something breaks through, it is notable. It's like, why did this particular thing break through? So maybe it's a question about how insular we are to begin with. But I think it depends on how the question was asked because there is that sort of there's a difference between like
Yeah,
being respectful of how it broke into this closed off system. But then there's always like, how could they have made this? There's a different
yeah,
way. There are different ways to ask the same question that I think
yeah.
have different connotations.
You're
Um,
probably right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, what other shows have broken through like that? I mean, when it comes to
internationally,
TV, yeah, international television.
very rare. I don't think it's really happened before. I mean,
Yeah,
because before,
I can't think of it either.
I think the big part of it is because Netflix is a global phenomenon,
Yeah,
because it acquires content from a lot of different
it's a conglomerate,
industries.
yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to in the past, TV used to be very localized, and then but
Yeah,
now we're at this moment where things can
TV is
circulate.
globalized, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a
It's a
big
bunch of different factors, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, it's a combination of, I think, the technology is allowing for it, but then also I think there is this interest in Korean culture and content more broadly, and so it's like this confluence. It's because confluence of factors where this
Yes.
became the one. Now.
Yes. It's like Squid Game was like the culmination act or whatever. Like everything was kind of aligned, and
Yeah.
this was like it really struck when the iron was hot, and it's just blown up to be this huge thing.
Yeah, that's one of the things I talk about though is Hallyu in when we talked about South Korean horror, but how how things get swept up in these kind of reductive ways. Where I think it is true that there is this sort of this appreciation of Korean culture that is pretty specific to South Korea, but you see these headlines that are like, BTS, Parasite, and Squid Game. Korea is breaking through. I'm like, these are all very different things. I mean,
very different.
Yes, yeah. Even if there might be a shared interest or overlap in viewership, it's always interesting how
the mediums are different. It's like it's music, film, and TV. Different auteurs. Different. Come on. But yeah, I mean that's the way of that kind of cheap journalism, right? Like the fast journalism. Yeah, that's how they function.
It's also optimized for search engines, because then you can Google Squid Game and then it pops up, or BTS, and then it's like
exactly, yeah, and all of that does kind of like water shit down and whatever. Anyway, Todd, I'm so happy that we got to catch up like this. Thank you for making the time. Yeah,
yes,
right?
It was fun.
This wasn't scary, right? This was actually fun. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It has nothing to be clear. So you're referring to the fact that I was said I was nervous. It had nothing to do with you particular.
Yeah, I know.
I just have like extreme public speaking anxiety, which is a great thing for a lecturer.
Yeah, that's exactly. But you're not the only one. A lot of academics are very, very hesitant to get on podcasts and talk. Like quite a few of them, and it's always for the exact same reason. Yeah, it's like they don't. Yeah, but no, thank you for trusting me enough to fight through that anxiety and doing this. And it was nice to catch up, and I loved your insights on things, so I appreciate all of that. Thank you.
All right. See you soon.
So, Nick, Porcelino, I'm going to ask you some series of questions. They're like what-if scenarios.
Alrighty.
And you just have to answer what you would do if you were in that scenario.
All right.
Okay? It's very easy. All right. Let's say you're a college girl. You go to a pretty prestigious school, computer engineering program. There is this college baseball player. He's starting to rise. Like he's a pitcher. He's like a rising star. Okay. He has the hots for you.
All right.
But you have feelings for this guy who's in medical school. He's a nobody. His nickname's Garbage. Everybody calls him Garbage. Okay. Because he's so disgusting.
Does he smell?
He sometimes. I mean, he's not very hygienic.
All right.
But you have feelings for this guy. But this baseball player guy is like really into it. Keeps asking you out. What do you do?
I would go with the baseball player until he needed Tommy John surgery, and then I had to spend all day with him and like wipe his ass and stuff, and I don't want any part of that. And then go to the medical student, and then ask the medical student for like help with the baseball player's medical issues. Really hit on the medical students.
So you'd do both of them basically?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Depending on the circumstances. Okay, I like it. You're a little slut. It's good.
Pretty much. Yeah, if I was a girl.
Okay, let's just say you're born in the South, all right? But this is like the city. It's like urban.
Like Atlanta?
Like LA, all right? Like you're like in a metropolitan city now. But the place where you were born, it was also technically a city. But all these other college kids keep calling you like a bumfuck country chick.
Yeah.
What do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah.
Just let them keep thinking that and lean into it.
Oh.
Yeah. You like play up my accent, make me sound really dumb, so I surprise them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like sticks and stones.
Well, I just want the lowest expectations for myself, and then when I do something smart or progressive, I look amazing. I look like an amazing person from the South.
Blow them out of the water.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Subvert their expectations.
Oh. All right. Let's say that you and this doctor guy, you started dating.
All right.
But as soon as you start dating, right? you get shipped away to Australia to work a job.
Okay, what kind of job?
Like computer or something. Computer engineering or something. All right? You're a smart chick. And the economy's terrible. Like fucking recession, everything's shit. Okay? And your boyfriend, doctor guy, very, very busy all the time. Always on call. And you're very, very busy in Australia. It's long distance kind of thing. And you guys haven't really spoken in a couple months. What do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah.
Keep not speaking and just do whatever I want to do in Australia.
Wow.
Because phone works both ways. Why isn't he contacting me?
That's a good point.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah. Okay, you'll let it fizzle out.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Just play my options in Australia, not commit. Just see what's out there. See if there's
Wow.
any Dundees that I wanna get with.
To play out the select.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Nick.